tracks in Brisbane, and alternative B, it's located on the west side of the tracks in Brisbane. And then the other two differentiators are the passing tracks. Alternative A does not have a passing track in the middle of the corridor. Alternative B has a passing track from basically southern part of San Mateo to the northern part of Redwood City. And then the last differences are tied to the San Jose to Merced project section in terms of the approach into Diridon Station. The board identified, thought I had a slide on it, but the board identified last year alternative A as the preferred alternative. So that's no passing track and east of Brisbane light maintenance facility. But we study both alternatives equally in the draft EIR-EIS. Other common features between both alternatives are the placement of the high-speed rail stations. So we look at 4th and King, Millbrae, and Diridon Station. We look at what's needed to track modifications and other things to support higher speeds, so upgrading the corridor to 110 miles an hour. And then in terms of operations, we look at adding 4 high-speed rail trains on top of what Caltrain looked at in their electrification EIR-EIS, which was the 6 Caltrain trains per hour per direction. Other common features, we studied the removal of the holdout rules at Broadway and Atherton Caltrain stations. Obviously, if the city or the town moves forward with eliminating the Atherton station, that would become a moot point. So we would not need to make those changes, but we study how we could make those. Safety modifications and corridor fencing up and down the corridor, but mostly looking to use the blended system. So the Caltrain electrification infrastructure and tracks up and down the corridor, sharing those with the Caltrain system. This is just in terms of where we are in the process with the release upcoming. We've gone through all of the internal steps, getting now through 508 remediation, which is for ADA accessibility purposes on San Francisco, San Jose. In San Jose to Merced, where that train is a little bit further up ahead, is in the middle of the public review period. And then for both project sections, we'll be going through these similar steps over the next kind of year after we get comments back, responding to all of those comments, making any changes, and then publishing the final EIR-EIS, and then getting towards a certified ROD. In terms of what's going to be in the documents, if you want a example, you can of course visit our website for the San Jose to Merced EIR-EIS, which is out now, and so you'll get a sense of these materials will look similar, but volume 1 includes the executive summary and the actual draft EIR-EIS itself. Volume 2 will be the technical appendices, and then volume 3 has all of the preliminary design drawings. In terms of the various chapters within volume 1, chapter 3 is probably going to be one of interest, which has all of the effects, all the mitigations are all listed in that one. Of course, there's a lot more in the document as a whole, but these will be the areas covered between chapters 3 and 6 in volume 1. And so there's extensive studies covering all of these different topics. I'm not going to try to go through each one by one. I think this presentation, Robert, I believe we sent it to you. So if you haven't yet, of course, you can make this available to the committee as well, so they know what's coming their way. And then in terms of public comment, as I mentioned, we're releasing July 10th and looking for public comments by August 24th. You can email us, you can send us your comments by mail, and of course, at least for now, we're planning on in-person meetings and engagements during the comment period. We have that big COVID-19 warning on the bottom here as we get closer, and it seems likely that we will transition to online formats for those engagements. We've recently done that for San Jose to Merced, and that seemed to be successful. And so we have some experience with conducting this engagement through online and teleconference meetings. So as we get closer, check the high-speed rail website, and we'll have more information about these various meetings and sessions. we'll be following, of course, any public health guidance on the best ways to hold meetings. We're not trying to guess what July and August will look like, but at least it seems likely that these will become online by the time we get around to them. So open houses, public hearing, which is the only place to give verbal comment. Everything else has to be written comments. And then also office hours, which is just an opportunity to engage with staff, ask questions, get help navigating the documents, etc. And with that, I think that's what we had to share today.
I got some questions.
Thank you, Boris. I think I'll see if the audience has any questions first, if the public has any comment on the San Jose to San Francisco part of Boris's presentation. Let's see if anyone has their hands raised. I do not see any, so I'll turn it over to committee members who have comments or questions, I should say. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, we've been in this game for so many years. I just never thought that there would not be built without a connection in Palo Alto and one at SFO. Has that ever been reconsidered? I mean, the natural connection of SFO with the airport, where you could buy a ticket in Beijing and use the train as a connection to go to the valley directly, in one ticket. And I can't believe that they're really not going to do that. And this Palo Alto, it's just so centralized to the Silicon Valley of people commuting to LA every day that have you considered either one of those as possibilities?
So we've considered both. So in terms of SFO, we have a station at Millbrae, which is, I'm highlighting here, which is our only stop on the peninsula between San Francisco and San Jose. That is in part to connect to SFO and in part to connect to the BART system there, of course. And so that's the planned connection to SFO through that station. And then in terms of sort of a mid-peninsula station, Palo Alto, in sort of the 2016, 2017 timeframe, we had looked at a second mid-peninsula station, so Redwood City, Palo Alto, or Mountain View. And at least at that time, all three cities basically said that they were not interested in having a station in their communities. And so our response to that was, okay, well, in my mind, there's probably still good reasons for us to consider a station somewhere in that stretch of the peninsula. But, if those communities are strongly opposed to it.
Don't you have the right of eminent domain if it's obvious from a business standpoint that that's where it should be?
I mean, could we build a station even if the city might oppose it? I think the answer is yes. Do we want to do that? The answer has been no.
Because I really think that from a business standpoint, if you had it in Palo Alto, you would get a lot of traffic to LA that you'll never get out of Millbrae. But I guess that's my gut feel. On the COVID-19, based on some programs I've listened to at Hoover, the expectation is there'll be 1 million people out of work when it's all over that won't go back to work because those jobs have been permanently displaced. And I just wondered whether you're thinking of getting some funding from the feds to hire those people to accelerate your program to get it done several years earlier, using those 1 million people as resources, plus some federal funding. And I think the federal funding would be a lot easier to get if you said you're going to put 1 million people back to work.
Well, I don't know the citation for the 1 million people necessarily. Obviously, right now we're kind of in the middle of, I think somebody said it was the worst public health crisis in 100 years, worst unemployment in 100 years, and the biggest civil unrest in 50 years, all at the same time. At least on the economic side, we've certainly seen, large transportation projects being part of recoveries from hard economic times. We were able to get federal stimulus funds in 2008, 2009 during the recession, the recovery from the last recession. So we're certainly looking at those opportunities. Our program is got more construction workers going right now than probably any large transportation project in the country, and more opportunity to come as we continue to extend into next stretches of the system. that are ready to go or almost ready to go for construction as well. So we certainly think we would be competitive in that environment, and would want to see that happen. And I think we have been part of the recovery in the Central Valley, to date, and we think that there's more that we can do, but some of those decisions are obviously not in our hands. So we'll pursue those opportunities as they come.
You're going to go ahead. I would think Kevin McCarthy would help you get the funding you need to hire the people to go back to work. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any other questions from committee members?
Yeah, Greg, I'm here.
Go ahead.
We've been looking at business plans for many, many years. And each one points to the fact that we're not going to be able to meet the requirements of Proposition 1A. We aren't going to be able to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 2 hours and 20 minutes. And we aren't going to be able to run it without an operating subsidy. So it looks as though we're just going to continue to build this system that's not going to meet its objectives, but we're going to spend the money anyway and probably not find out that it won't meet those objectives until it's all done and $100 billion has been spent. Is there any way that the project can be halted to prevent that waste of money? Does it take the legislature? Does it take a new proposition? What does it take to stop this waste?
I think we might have to agree to disagree, but we know the requirements that the system is under from what the voters were promised in 2008, and that's exactly what we're working and designing the system towards. And in terms of, I guess, the second half of your question, our job and what our agency has been tasked with by California and its voters and the legislature has been to develop and deliver this system and get it operating. So I'll leave it to others on if they want to make a different decision.
Thank you, Jack and Robert. Sorry, Boris and Jack. Robert, you had some questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I did have a couple of questions. Your EIR for your presentation is going off of Caltrain's old EIR for electrification, which is quite a number of years old. Their current business plan efforts gear towards a much higher train frequency. Are you planning to address that in any fashion?
I mean, I think that this is a little bit of sort of the evolution of planning in this rail corridor, and we're obviously cognizant of their business plan and what they're looking at in the future. But it kind of goes from the conceptual planning when electrification was being proposed in late 90s. High-speed rail was sort of something out in the horizon, and as that electrification project moved to environmental clearance, we were working to define what the high-speed rail infrastructure need was in this rail corridor and doing that planning work. We have now refined that and have a good understanding of it, and that's what's being put forward in the EIR-EIS. At the same time, Caltrain has now turned around and looking at their future that goes beyond the addition of high-speed rail in the corridor, but other growth that they may want to take on. And so, we are obviously cognizant of it and we'll be taking that into account, but it's not something that we are studying and looking to environmentally clear through this EIR-EIS, as that's not our project.
Did you have any other Paul? But Robert, I think, had one more question.
I had one more question, and that's related to, I guess, the business plan and your alignments that you are planning for in this EIR through the San Francisco to San Jose segment, specifically the right-of-way needs in Brisbane and Millbrae. how is it that you are, I'm going to say that those areas have been slated for development and approved by the respective councils and the voting public. How does your needs mesh with the development plans?
Yeah, I mean, we know about the developments on in both of those areas, and we're working with some of those developers and the communities there on resolving some of the interface and any conflict issues with those. So that I think will be a ongoing process. Obviously, we have the ability to plan our system, and we're working with those communities on how they integrate, how we can integrate into what they have going on as well.
Okay. Paul, go ahead with your question.
Achieving 110 miles an hour down the peninsula is going to require quad gates or grade separations at all of the existing grade crossings. Do you have in your plans any sort of a timetable as to when that work will be undertaken and by whom?
So we are proposing quad gates at all of the grade crossings, and so I think we have some assumptions around construction timing and sequence, but some of those decisions will have to come in the future, because I know there's lots of cities looking at either upgrades at grade crossings or grade separations, and other changes that they may want to do, and so some of those decisions, obviously we don't want to have unnecessary throwaway. So if a city's going to grade separate an intersection 2 years from now, and that fits within our timeline for what we need to do, then we'll obviously defer to that grade separation project. So those will be things we'll continue to be looking at as we get from this stage to the next stages and towards construction.
Well, I hope you're talking to those people so that you can coordinate your efforts.
Very much so.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, if not, want to thank Boris, James, and Yvonne for attending today, and thank you, Boris, for presenting and answering all our questions. You guys are welcome to stay, but we'll understand if you have some dinner plans to attend to.
Okay, well, thanks very much for having us, and I'm gonna excuse myself at least, but appreciate the dialogue and back and forth with the committee. I'm sure we'll be hearing more as over the next few months.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see what's next on the agenda is we've got Caltrain update, and this is not an action item, it's an update. So let's, Robert, do you want to provide that update?
Certainly, pursuant to the council's direction, subcommittee has been formed to work with Caltrain regarding closure plans. Caltrain is proceeding with some of the analyses that they would need to do if closure were to happen. The committee has met a couple of, I think once or twice with Caltrain to have discussions. And that's all that I have to report at this point in time, but
So I understand.
This is not an action. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I understand that council has decided a direction, so there's no action for us as a rail committee to advise them of, and if any of us have individual comments, we can take that up individually with the council if we'd like.
A question?
Go ahead.
Who is on this subcommittee?
That would be the mayor and Councilmember Wiest.
Thank you.
I can give a few more, if people haven't seen the city manager's reports from the last couple of city council meetings. There's some more updates about the station closure specifics the city manager gave as well. I'll just provide those. The JPB targeting July 2020 for approval of approving that closure of the plan. They're looking at Quad Gates project completion for Watkins around mid-2022. The time when they'll stop using the station is to be determined. Caltrain, some of the studies they have to go through are things like Title VI, looking for funding grants, doing some environmental, seeing if the state can give them, provide some of the money to do the closure, things like that. So they've been doing that for the past few months. They're also preparing a property lease and construction schedule for the Quad Gates during this time. And Atherton and Caltrain have been working on the MOU, as most of you know. So, with that, are there any questions or comments?
You have a
This is
couple
Jim.
of hands. I think you have
Yes.
Jim and then Roland.
Yeah, is there a
And I
draft
believe
memorandum?
Scott had his hands raised.
Sure. Jim, go ahead.
Is there a draft MOU available that we could review?
Not yet.
Scott, did you have any questions?
No, you answered my question.
Oh, okay.
I think
Was there
Roland still has his hand up.
any other questions?
Is it my
Yeah,
turn?
this is
Roland.
Is it my turn?
and I do have a comment, please.
Okay.
And I'm unfortunately not on the video. It was all right this morning, but I've had some technical difficulties, so I'm on just the phone at this point.
Okay.
I guess I wasn't aware that the council had moved on to the point of actually dealing with the plan to close it. My feelings are well known on this, of course, having been involved with this for many, many years. And while I think that in general, the people on the staff at Caltrain have been responsive to local concerns and needs, but there have been some that were definitely, very definitely anti-Atherton, wanting to eliminate service for many years. In my opinion, the information and the techniques used are wrong. The fact is that, I mean, the idea that we're going to make a big difference in terms of the overall system, I think, is pretty absurd. If there are 29 or so stops up and down the peninsula, and you stop at Atherton for 3 minutes or whatever it might be, we're talking about 1/10 of a minute for each of the stops. We're not really going to be dealing with that. Or you could say, well, we maybe save some money on the fuel. The fact is that they've taken steps to impact our service. They've done things by cutting service significantly and cutting out all of our peak time service, and of course, cutting out all our weekday service. That certainly impacts your ridership. Then you can argue, well, there's not the ridership to support that. That isn't the case. They have caused the problems that have occurred. And I think that if we go back in time, we did a survey of the town, this is a number of years ago, concerning the station, because there had been concern before. And over 80% of the town wanted to maintain the service. Not only do they want to maintain the service, but we're contributing over $500,000 every single year to Caltrain, $10 million higher than that over the period of the original Measure A. And so what is happening here is definitely wrong, and it's not going to benefit the system overall. It's going to certainly be a disadvantage for our residents. Parking we've always made it available free of charge at the Atherton parking, and we're not limited on the time. If you park any other station on the system, you're going to be towed away after 24 hours. There are just many disadvantages, and I know we have limited time, so I'm not going to go into those again. But the fact is, it is wrong to eliminate service. It's the oldest stop in the entire state. 50 years before we even were a city, there was a stop here. It was before the very first station was ever built, which was happened to be in Menlo Park. And so I think I am amazed that we're moving forward without at least going to the community, as we did in the past, for a survey. Now, I realize we had a meeting and local people indicated their support for dropping the service, but community-wide, as I say, it's over 80% supporting that. And I cannot believe that we as a town are moving forward with plans that run against what the town wants with this heavy investment that we made into the system. This is the wrong thing to do. And frankly, we read, we're not quite sure what the future is going to be, because if we look at the headlines recently with COVID-19, that we've dropped over 50% of the ridership, and we can look at the short-term impacts financially, but anybody having been involved with this knows that there's a long-term financial viability question for the line. And the reason, of course, is that we don't have a permanent funding source. There are answers for this, and one would be to combine. If we really are serious about doing the things that are going to save some money and make the system long-term viable financially, we would combine Caltrain in with the Capital Corridor and BART. BART has always been interested in providing the service on the peninsula, bringing the pay with BART, and the fact is, in our county, we never have the opportunity to vote on this issue. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think if any committee member has objections to the plans, they should contact council. I understand you feel very strongly about it and understand where you're coming from here, but since it's not an action item, we won't be able to make a recommendation, but as individually, we can always go to the council ourselves and bring up our concerns directly.
What was our vote? I don't remember. What was our vote?
Oh, we never voted on it.
Oh yeah, we voted on it because I remember I abstained.
Oh, that was well, that was a while ago. Might have been.
It was 4-3, wasn't it, Paul?
Something like that.
It was 4-2, yes.
4-2.
Which way? Which way?
I think it was in favor of keeping it open, but the council heard the vote and the recommendation.
Well, the logical approach would be to have an initiative to have the voters decide if it's that important.
You'd have to ask the council. I would recommend that you express that desire to the council.
Ultimately, it's a council decision since they're the elected officials of the town.
Well, not
Greg, as you'll remember, after the rail committee voted, the town council had its regularly scheduled meeting, and the decision was to set the recommendation of the rail committee aside and to pursue the closing. So, and then the town voted to close the station. So that has all occurred a long time ago, over the last year and a half. You've been there.
Well, I guess I'm still saying that, Malcolm, if you feel strongly, there's always the alternative of getting signatures to put an initiative on the ballot for the November election.
I think you're right, and I'm inclined to do that. I think that we're running against what the community at large wants. It's wrong. It's been based upon lies. They've promised things. When they cut out our weekday service, they said, well, we're going to take care of it. We're going to give you a shuttle between Atherton and Redwood City. We know how long that lasted. That's not a viable answer. They tell us, well, if you want to reclose this one, you can walk a 3-mile path over to Menlo Park. Can you imagine seniors walking 3 miles to go over to catch a train in Menlo? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I
so
think
we ought to be honest. And we're going through a time right now when people have good reason to not trust what government says, what they're going to do. They made a promise to us that we would
thank
have
you, Malcolm.
service forward. And so maybe
cut
the
you off,
initiative, Craig, maybe you're right. And I'm inclined to do that. I've been involved with that over 30 years ago with one, and I'm inclined to think that's the right answer. Then I know the council will respond.
Thank you.
But
Okay, I
the
think
only
that you
way.
should express your
Let's move
concerns
on
to
to Roland's
council.
question. Roland, you had a question or discussion or public
Thank you.
comment?
Thank you. Is it my turn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So what I'm gonna propose to you is actually probably gonna be make everybody, happy, including Malcolm. I gave a presentation to the Redwood City Council, I think it was back in February, it was pre-COVID, to have a second station in Redwood City at Redwood Junction. And that station is essentially a full-blown high-speed rail station, which is what our friends have been wanting forever. But it also provides us a connection to the mountain rail. And that station is modeled after EBS Fleet, EBBS FLEET International in London. It's on the east side of London. And what that buys Redwood City, instead of having to take the mountain rail all the way down into downtown Redwood City and basically blowing up the whole of downtown, it leaves it intact. But they have got the mountain rail connection, and they're saving $1 billion in the process, which would probably help Facebook with the decision to basically stop work on the EIR. So in closing, I'm happy to give this presentation, same presentation, either to the Rail Committee or City Council at your leisure, but I'm gonna obviously need your help because now we are in COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, 5B, Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project Update and Discussion.
Okay, so as you have probably noticed, Balfour Beatty is working in the vicinity of the Watkins Avenue crossing. They are putting up their new communications building, as well as trenching for communication lines to the different quadrants for the gates. In our previous discussion, there was a question as to whether or not the communications building would be able to manage a quad gate were it to come to pass. And the information that we got from Caltrain at that time and reconfirmed was that the communication structure would be able to house the equipment for future quad gates. We are hoping that they will be done in the next week or so with the work there at the crossing. It's been done during the day without too much of a hiccup, and we look forward to having that work complete. They will still have to come back to put in additional foundations there at the crossing, as well as to stand up the poles, which they have not done yet. But they are continuing to do that work up and down the corridor.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Roland, I see you have your hand up. Did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, very quickly. So first of all, the quad gates are going to happen everywhere. Anything that is not grade separated will get quad gates. That's going to be in the High Speed Rail Authority EAR. And quite frankly, it's going to be done with or without the High Speed Rail Authority. The real issue we have, and I believe Paul is very familiar with this, is the grade crossings. They're just flat not going to work. I've tried to explain to Caltrain how to make this work about 18 months ago. Eventually, I guess it got lost in the mail. So I'm essentially going to do a draft design to explain to them how to make constant morning time work with electrification, because the way things are right now, we're not going to get electrification working until 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Are there any other comments or questions? Scott, I see your hand.
Yeah, I remember back when they were working on CBOS, they did, Caltrain did a lot of trenching for communication wiring back then. So now they're doing it again. So are they not going to even use the CBOS related wiring, or is there something else going on?
I think this is just specifically new connectivity to the communications building that they're installing. So right now there's a control house, and they are putting in a newer one, a little larger, further to the north. So just north of the existing one. Okay, yeah, Paul?
Yeah, do you have some kind of a measure of progress of the overall project? Are they continuing to slip behind as they have done in the past?
I think that their overall schedule is a bit behind where they were. They haven't provided us with an overall schedule update.
Thank you.
And any other questions or comments?
Yeah, one question I forgot to ask the high-speed rail. When is the projection of when it'll be completed? Did anybody ever know that? Is it still 2029?
You and I will be long
Why
dead.
don't we hit that up on 5C?
2030.
Item 5C is high-speed rail, so we can talk about it then.
With that, let's move on to 5C, the high-speed rail update and EIR EIS discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to kick this off. You know, I'm going to say thank you again to the high-speed rail folks and Boris and his team for preparing the presentation and giving us an outline. I think that their business plan had a projection of when they were anticipating completion. I don't recall the date specifically, but we do have a few items that are rolling upon us, no pun intended, in terms of things that are going to be released, specifically the EIR that's going to be coming out prior to our next meeting. And as they said, I think the date is July 10th that they're anticipating release. I am hoping that you've all had an opportunity to take a look at the format that was put together for the San Jose to Merced segment, which will give us a flavor of what to expect in this document. And what we'd like to do is kind of discuss how the committee would like to tackle review of that EIR and put together some comments for consideration.
Thank you, Robert. So I guess hopefully some of you or most of you have looked at what the Gilroy to, I think, Merced segment, what that EIR looks like. It's quite a lengthy document, We'll probably need to have a small committee of folks come together to assemble all the public comments, I should say all the committee comments, and formulate a letter. Just based on the dates that Boris gave, there won't be a council meeting between, well, there will be one, I think, in mid-July, and then there won't be another one till September because our council goes dark in August. So I think, and we also meet first week of August. So we're going to probably formulate the document for our committee, and then we'll probably publish it with staff or something similar to that. Is that what you're thinking of, Robert?
Well, I'm going to seek direction, but the recommendation would be that, you know, as you indicated, a subcommittee kind of put together to review and compile comments, draft a response letter, and we can seek direction as to whether or not that can go out under the city manager's signature.
Okay.
If the public comment period does not get extended, depending on the timeline that we work on, we can potentially bring back some sort of draft to the committee, but that timeline, I mean, it'll be a little tight. I think we'd have probably about 2 to 3 weeks to start reviewing the comments, but certainly we can have a conversation as well at the August meeting.
Yeah, the August meeting is about 3.5 weeks after.
Yeah, I think Paul has his hand raised
Go ahead, Paul.
on the screen.
Is there not going to be a national night out on the first Tuesday of August this year? Has that been canceled?
Due to COVID, it's been postponed. I
So
think
we can
that
actually, we can meet on our date instead of a week later.
Exactly.
that is correct. I believe that the tentative date is in October.
Fine.
Correct.
While I've got your attention, I'd like to commend Robert for the way he put together the critique on the business plan. I thought he did an outstanding job.
Well, I'm going to say thank you. I didn't do it by myself. I certainly had help from the committee with the comments that they provided. And I appreciated working with you and with, what's that? Sorry, Carrie, I think you're muted. I'm going to try and unmute you. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I agree, and thank you very much. There was a lot of work involved. Did you get that?
We did.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so I think what we need then is a small committee group among the rail committee to kind of put together the comments that will, kind of formulate them and form it similar to what we did with the business plan. So I don't, if anyone wants to volunteer, I'm happy to hear it. We'll probably need, I would say, a couple people to work with Robert and staff on this.
Well,
Alex, I didn't contribute very much to the business plan because I don't know very much about business, but I know quite a bit about environment.
Okay.
So I would be happy to be part of that if you want.
John, and then I also saw Paul, you have your hand up. And as chair, I'm happy to volunteer as well.
All right. Well, that makes that'll be a nice subcommittee. I think what we did last time in terms of we certainly appreciate the input from the entire committee, and my request would be that you provide your comments directly to me, and I will compile those for the subcommittee to review along with their comments as well.
And then just a reminder that the document, when it gets published, is going to be very, very long. So there will be, dates that we'll want to get comments in by and the feedback from the committee members in by. So I would say just focus on the key parts that you believe are important to provide feedback to high-speed rail on first, and then whatever you're done with, just send it into the subcommittee members at that, or I should say to Robert at that time, and he'll communicate that to the subcommittee. Okay.
This is Roland. Can I speak briefly?
We'll wait till we finish with the staff report and this discussion. But
about the EIR. Okay.
Yeah, we'll just give us a second, Roland. I just want to make sure we're done, and then we'll open it up to more discussion because this is kind of a business we're trying to decide. But Robert, is there anything else?
No, again, I appreciate the help, all the help I can get from the committee. It is a rather lengthy document. What I will do is see if I can't get a electronic version sent to the town so that we can post it on our website as well for easier access by the committee.
Okay, great. Roland, I guess I'll open up to public comment and questions at this time. Go ahead,
I think
Roland.
he muted himself here. I'll go ahead and unmute him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So very briefly, I want to point out to you that your EIR for the peninsula actually stops at Scott Boulevard, which is just north of Santa Clara, which basically means San Jose is in a separate EIR. And it's a real problem. And especially because for some reason San Jose is somehow connected to Merced, and we all know that Pacheco Passage will never happen. So what I'm proposing, and I'm hoping to get support in the peninsula, is to have a separate EIR between San Francisco and Gilroy, and then let the High-Speed Rail Authority do whatever they want to do south of Gilroy. Thank you. Oh, one last thing. If you ask when the comment period starts, they will send you a little card, plastic card, which is a USB flash drive, and the entire EIR is on the flash drive.
Okay, good to know. Anyone else from the public or committee members have a comment or a question?
Jack Ringham, I got a question or a comment addressing Greg's question about when is this program supposed to end, high-speed rail. On page 139 of the 2020 business plan, it says that they're going to complete the Silicon Valley to Central Valley line opening in the year 2031. And phase one, which is all the way between San Francisco and Los Angeles, Anaheim, 2 years later in 2033. And then they call the horizon year of phase one operations, and I have no idea what horizon year is supposed to mean, but that's 2040.
We'll all be dead, Jack.
Right.
We'll be long gone.
Right.
Get that right.
Speak for yourself, guys.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing no one's else hands raised, let's move on to 5D and the Caltrain update.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did you want to do that, Alex?
Sure, I will do it. My son just barged in, but so Caltrain is working on a few things that will affect the peninsula. One of the things they're working on is possibly putting a 1/8 cent sales tax on the November ballot for San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. And currently, they are a couple of the boards that need to approve it have approved it. That includes the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors and SamTrans. In total, they'll need 7 boards to approve. So all 3 boards of supervisors of the counties, all 3 transit authorities, and then of course Caltrain. So they've got 5 more to go. Politically, it might have a difficult time just because of COVID, and there'll be a economic downturn. But certainly we're all aware that Caltrain is looking for a way to get more funding, and this is one of the ways they want to do it. We should know by our next meeting, because I believe August 7th is the filing deadline to get a sales tax on the ballot for November. So we should know within the next couple months if they actually do it or not. Second update is Caltrain's also in the process of exploring changing its governance structure. The new governance model will likely, that they're thinking of or they're investigating, will likely separate Caltrain from SamTrans. This change is generally being pushed by the Santa Clara and San Francisco counties. They would like to have some more input, I would say, into how Caltrain runs. As you all know, SamTrans chooses the Caltrain CEO. Caltrain shares SamTrans staff and legal counsel. So last November, they began talks about this new governance structure with 1 county rep each. So that's something that's coming down the line that could change how Caltrain runs in terms of both those who are the employees who are running it, as well as who's controlling the governance as well. So that's my update. Any questions or comments?
I have just one other thing to add.
Sure, Robert.
I don't know if anybody has seen it, but today in the Post there was an article about Caltrain and ridership and budgetary shortfalls. They are indicating that due to COVID and the shelter-in-place order and everything associated with it, their passenger counts have dropped by approximately 97%, and they're forecasting about a $20 million shortfall. I think that it's I'm going to say not unexpected that with the shelter-in-place and the requirements in the counties that Caltrain serves, that ridership has suffered or is reduced quite a bit. Predominantly right now for essential workers. It's unknown at this time how much ridership is going to increase with as the shelter-in-place orders are modified, and what the comfort level of riders will be both on Caltrain and BART when the shelter-in-place orders are relaxed over time. I'll be sending out probably tomorrow a copy of the article to the committee to share, and then we'll post it with the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Robert, may I add something to that?
Okay, go ahead,
Sure.
Marissa.
I just wanted to elaborate on what Robert said. I read the minutes of the last JPB meeting, and it said that their ticket sales were down 95%, and they are forecasting right now for fiscal year 2020 an $11 million deficit, but they're receiving $23 million from the federal government. And in total, they've already got a commitment from the federal government for $50 million.
Okay.
And they're pursuing other federal subsidies.
Yeah. I see Scott has his hand up. Scott?
Yeah. I just thought I'd mention that there's even if their funding plan were to pass, if the voters were to approve their dedicated funding model, there's no guarantee that the government agencies that are currently funding them will continue funding. So this is speculation on my part, but there's a lot of newspaper articles that support this, that it's very likely that the government agencies that are supporting them now will pull back their funding. So in the end, regardless of whether this passes or not, there's a very good chance that Caltrain will not see a net increase in funding at all.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Roland, you had your hand up.
I think Paul is first.
Oh, okay. Paul, go ahead.
Has Caltrain cut back on their schedule?
Oh, yeah.
Quite significantly.
I've seen various articles, but I don't know what has actually happened. It seems to me I heard that they're running weekend schedules every day or something of that sort.
I think I saw
something of that sort.
70 a day down to 40 a day.
Yeah, that sounds about right. 40 a day.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there was, I guess it was in the rumor category, but there was talk from Caltrain at one point in an article about discontinuing service for a while.
I remember that for the weekends.
No, total.
Scott, what did you read that gave you the impression that those two counties may drop out?
Just a few articles that I did during my research time. I couldn't give you a specific citation, but logically it makes sense because those transit agencies could repurpose that money for their own transit infrastructure. So it's entirely plausible that they could rescind some or all of their funding if Caltrain gets a dedicated funding model.
This is Malcolm, and I do have a further comment. It's one thing to focus on COVID and what impacts that has, and yes, it's been significant. However, the problems are long-term for Caltrain. They have never had a permanent funding source. That's one reason when we bought the right-of-way, the TA was one that administers those funds on the sales tax back to the 88 measure. And we couldn't put in the TA's name because we're not permanent either, or we weren't, and still are not. Samtrans is because of the time they became into existence, and that's why it's in their name. Two of these were exercised as options, both the Dumbarton and also go down to Gilroy. But so the long-term problems are there and they're serious, and there is an answer to that. It's not one that I favored in the past, but I'm certainly now with Caltrain behaving as they have. I think it ought to be merged into to Capital Corridor and BART. There are many, many savings, duplications that could be saved, and the numbers I've seen would be a significant savings, and it would put them strongly, and I wouldn't want to see everybody let go immediately, obviously, but there are things that could happen. It would be a gradual process, phasing BART, which they've always wanted to circle the bay with BART, from Millbrae down to San Jose would be gradual. So longer term, that's an answer. And as I've thought about what's been happening now, promises that are made, we were made a promise we're going to have service here. Promises are broken. I guess that's not too surprising, but it's not the way we like to trust our government. And so, and I think that Greg's suggestion that I feel very strongly what we're doing is wrong here. And I've been involved with an initiative before. We did this many years ago, and it was successful. And the council had not been responsive. Actually, it was a lawsuit brought, and Mike Brady happened to represent the town in this particular case through Ropers Majeski. But in any case, I think that as I've thought it through what's been happening in here, and the lack of response concern for the real needs and the inconveniences that are caused to all of us in Atherton, the changes, and not being willing to go out to the public, I think an initiative is the answer, and I think it should be three-part. One is,
So
I think
this is
that
not really
Malcolm, I think that's outside of the scope of this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm saying so what I'm planning to do then is to have an initiative to deal with three things. One would be considering going into BART. Another one would be
this is not relevant to the topic. We can't discuss this.
Okay, well then we can do that. I mean, I can do that separately as an issue.
Correct,
but
yeah.
I think what's happening here is wrong.
Please do.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Roland, go ahead.
Thank you. So first of all, the sales tax and the governance are absolutely tied together. And what's happened is that neither Santa Clara or San Francisco are going to go ahead with the sales tax basically until Samtrans is gone. It's that simple. That's where the nexus is. Now, the reason, okay, if you look at worldwide and nationally, commuter rail is down 90%, not 98%. And the reason why Caltrain completely tanked is because they addressed the social distancing issue that killing the baby bullet. The only thing they're running right now is a all stops, a local service that takes an hour and 40 minutes between San Jose and San Francisco that nobody's interested in unless they're desperate. There's another issue that needs to be addressed. Now, with regards to the other agencies withdrawing their funding, yes, the VTA have tried to do that. However, we voted for Caltrain funding in 2000 Measure A, so that particular attempt is illegal. It could be, and it will be challenged in court. And the last comment is that a complete shutdown, yes, they've looked at it. However, it is not an option because they're getting federal funding, and until they do, they will not be able to shut the line down. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. Any other comments or questions? If not, let's move on to.
This is Jim. I want to.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I think they're being foolish trying to put through a sales tax measure at this time, or a funding measure at this time, because things are going to be different coming out of the lockdown. You know, major institutions, corporations like Facebook, Google are going permanently, to having more and more of their staff work online and not have to come to an office. Caltrain was overwhelmed with passenger traffic up until February. They were over capacity. They had more people than they could really handle. They were standing room only on their trains. They're going to find things a lot different when the lockdown is over and we get herd immunity and everybody goes back to doing what they were before. I don't think they're going to be nearly as busy as they were before, and I think we ought to see how things shake out before they even think about going for a more permanent funding source.
Yep. Yeah, it's not a done deal that they will actually go out with a sales tax, but that's what they were all hoping for the past few years when they were discussing it. But we'll see what happens the next.
Understood.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, let's move on to 5E, Dumbarton Rail Corridor update. Robert.
I don't know if Scott has an update.
Oh, Scott.
The only thing that
the
only thing I had
is my understanding is that Facebook is considering backing out of the Cross Bay Transit Partnership. They want to focus more of their time on local community issues as a side effect of COVID-19. And this impacts their ability to fund environmental studies on the merits of rebuilding the trellis and putting in a modern version of a overpass that will support trains. So that the whole project's now sort of in limbo potentially. That's the only update I have.
Robert,
the same one I did.
Aware of that?
Okay.
Is the Peninsula City Council aware of that?
I'm not sure. I would imagine so, but I've only learned about what I know based on news articles. I'm not sure whether the local councils are aware of the update or not.
Have they said they're going to fund at least the EIR part, or even that's?
They're reconsidering.
No, I think they're pulling out. They had indicated that they're pulling out funding more or less now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who said that? Who said that?
Facebook's representative.
Who was that?
I don't know the
Robert.
name. I picked it up.
Oh, Robert? That was Robert? Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Roland?
Go ahead, Roland.
Okay, so very briefly, what happened here is that as many of us predicted, this project was totally out of control. We're now looking at $3 billion with a capital B dollars. And at that point, Facebook just went, what is the point of getting environmental clearance for this? We're never ever going to build this. And the problem is the bookend stations. They should never have tried to go into Redwood City. I touched on that earlier. It's actually worse on the other side, and they don't even know where the location of the New York station is. And then you got another $1 billion boondoggle trying to get to Union City that frankly doesn't have anything to do with this. So the end, once again, it's the same trains all over. We need to go back, have a complete rethink, and once sanity prevails, I think we can go back and start a new EIR, and I'm sure Facebook will come back on board with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Any other questions or comments?
What did he just say? All of a sudden he said he thought they'd do an EIR and come back. And
We're gonna do another EIR and get the job done once and for all.
Okay.
We're gonna do a crossing, period.
Agree with that, Scott?
It's hard to say. I mean, I'm a proponent of the whole project, but it's hard to say.
Well, that'd be a shame.
So moving on to item 6, committee and staff member comments. Are there any committee members or staff members that want to share a comment?
There's a curfew tonight. You can go out for costumes before the curfew at 8:30.
Okay, sounds like there is none.
I don't.
And so let's open up for public comment. Roland or anyone else who's here want to make a final public comment? Hearing none. Future agenda items. Is this just a proposal for anyone who wants to put on a future agenda item? Robert?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I'd like to see Roland's presentation that he gave to the Redwood City Council. And I'd like to, if it's up to Malcolm, but if he would like to discuss his proposal for town initiative, I'd like to hear that as well.
Okay, this is Roland. So who do I send the presentation to?
You can forward it to me.
Okay, and then the second part, was that something to do with me? Could you repeat?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other future agenda items? Anyone wants to propose? Okay.
You will of course have a update and review of the EIR, the high-speed EIR at the next meeting.
Yes, that's going to be a requirement.
That document should start to come together by then at very least.
Yes, yeah. We'll be about 3.5 weeks in, so we'll have to create by then. I'm thinking we'll have to give everyone maybe 2 weeks, and then that'll give the subcommittee members about 1.5 weeks and staff to pull together a rough draft that can be reviewed. Maybe something like that.
Somebody said earlier that if you ask the right person, you could get a jump drive with that thing on it. How do you get that?
I think Roland made that comment, and maybe
yeah, I did it for the other one, and so basically once they release it, they have an avenue to make that request, and I can certainly make that. Once it's released, I'll let you know how to request it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item 9, next meeting will be August 4th. We're not having the National Night Out, so we'll very rarely meet on the first week of August. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I heard a second from John, and so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks. And
all right, well, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Carrie.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.